Zionism and Israel has never had less credit in the bank of public opinion in the world than it has today. And Israel has elected governments of the right going more and more and more to the right as each year has gone on. And in my lifetime, in my time in this cause, the seminal events have been 1982. And I happened to be there and trapped in Beirut at the time when Israel swept across the Lebanese border, not for the first time, certainly not for the last time, crushed everything in their midst, killed thousands of people, besieged the western part of Beirut and began to reduce an Arab capital to rubble and ash, dropping, by the way, phosphorus weapons for the first time. And I saw the child victims of the phosphorus weapons dropped by Israel in 1982 on the Palestinian and Lebanese civilian population. I suppose most of you are aware that white phosphorus cooks you to death. When it enters your lungs, it bakes you to death. At 800 degrees, it bakes you to death, and white smoke comes out of your mouth and your nose until you are dead. And I was there and I saw it. And I escaped from the city just before the great massacres of Sabra and Shatila, camps in which I had lived, were the site of one of the most atrocious massacres of defenseless civilians that the 20th century saw, certainly since the Second World War. Close. So, this story is a long one, but Israel lost a very great deal as a result of the Sabra and Shatila massacre. It didn't look like it at the time, but it was the beginning of a hemorrhaging of support around the world, even here. And then there was the Intifada, when an unarmed population in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem rose up with their stones against the mighty occupation which stood with its boots on their neck and hurled those stones like modern-day Davids at the Goliaths who occupied them. And the whole world saw, as the new media age was dawning then, the brutality with which this unarmed uprising was crushed. Another major hemorrhage in the position of Zionism and Israel in the world can be traced back to those days. Then there was the invasion again of Lebanon by Israel in 2006, when not only was this barbaric war machine unleashed again, but this time it lost, and the Lebanese people became the first Arabs ever to inflict a defeat upon this Goliath, proving that the strength, the very strength, expensively paid for by the United States of this colonial enterprise was beginning to ebb away along with its political strength, that the people of the surrounding area could not be endlessly defeated every time the Israeli war machine was trundled out. And another big hole in the tank of Israel's credibility in the world was punctured. And lastly, the 22-day spasm of savage violence which Israel unleashed on the 27th of December over Christmas and New Year Now in the new media age, when we are not dependent on Fox News or CNN or the Bush and Blair Corporation that used to be the BBC, now we have Al Jazeera, the Press TV, the YouTube, and all the wonders of the internet. We were able to see a bout of savagery which the British Empire at its height would have found hard to match. In fact, it was unique in many respects. The first of which was it was the first war in history, certainly since the uprising of the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, in which those who wished to rain down death and destruction on a captive civilian defenseless population were locked up so that they had nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. So those who were about to destroy them took the precaution of locking all the doors before they did so. And we saw the phosphorus, we saw the massacres, we read of the horrific mass murders of whole families, whole clans, whole districts. Of Zaytun, for example, on the edge of Gaza City, where a child was found suckling on the toe of her dead mother, who had lain dead for 3 days in the ruins, where children had their arms and their legs eaten off by dogs roaming in the rubble, with the ambulance people refused permission to go in to recover their bodies. We know that 1,400 Palestinians were killed. We know that more than 5,000 Palestinians were maimed. Hundreds suffered amputation of limbs. Scores suffered double amputation of limbs. And unbelievable as it is, dozens suffered triple amputation of limbs. Going around now in wheelchairs, if they can get them through the siege, for the rest of their lives. 61,000 Palestinian houses were damaged or destroyed in 22 days. Can you imagine 61,000 houses leaving here tonight and discovering that 61,000 of the houses in Washington, D.C. had been destroyed, and the families whose houses they were living in the rubble? Then in the bitter cold of winter, now in the baking hot of summer, because not one of those houses has been repaired. Because not a bag of cement, not a hammer, not a nail, not a sheet of glass has been permitted to enter Gaza by the Israeli siege since the bombardment ceased. The people in Gaza are eating from the garbage heaps. In 2009, this I say to the Muslims in the audience, in 2009, part of your ummah, and not just any part, the part whose heart is Jerusalem itself, the people are eating from the garbage heaps.